Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this exclusive video interview series brought to you by Oracle in association with People Matters. I'm Yasmin Tat, Senior Editor with People Matters Media, and I'll be your host for this conversation. Oracle, in association with People Matters, is curating a series of video interviews titled The Reboot Toolkit. We all know that the workplace is going to be new for HR too. There is a growing consensus among HR and business leaders that the emerging new workplace will be hybrid in nature. This means companies need to reimagine and redesign their strategies. From recruiting, experience, and skilling, companies will need to rethink workplace practices in a way that enables them to make optimum use of talent with flexibility as a key business value proposition. In order to understand more on this, we have in focus three industries: BFSI, healthcare, and IT/ITES, from which renowned industry leaders of top notch organizations will share their invaluable inputs on various facets of reimagining work. These inputs will be stitched together in the form of a first of its kind video ebook, which is designed to give you a holistic view of the emerging future, technology priorities, and strategic action steps that business and HR leaders need to be thinking about. This video ebook features some of the best and brightest leaders reflecting on the principles that they will rely on to make the most of a quickly changing marketplace. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome Vikram Bector, President and Chief Human Resources Officer for the Piramal Group. Vikram comes with 27 plus years of professional experience across diverse sectors like IT, consulting, automotive, and healthcare. He has previously worked with big global Indian conglomerates and MNCs like Cipla, Reliance Industries Limited, Tata Motors, Deloitte, Satyam Computers, and Aditya Birla Group. We also have with us Shaakun Khanna, Head of HCM Applications Asia Pacific at Oracle Corporation, who leads the strategy and business development for Oracle Human Capital Management applications for the Asia Pacific region. Thank you, Vikram, and thank you, Shaakun, for joining us today. So, without further ado, let's begin our conversation. So, I'll start with you, Vikram. As a healthcare organization that was on the forefront of transforming and helping companies transform to a digital first mode, what were some barriers to technology adoption for you?
Actually, we are a conglomerate. So healthcare is pharmaceuticals is one business. So we are into financial services, real estate, of course, healthcare, and so I think, and glass manufacturing, glass container manufacturing. So I think for us, I would say there were no challenges because our investments in digitization and technology had started way back. So I would like to believe that globally, whether in the US, UK, Sri Lanka, India, or other markets, our transition to work from home and leveraging these technologies has been pretty easy, especially if you talk about COVID. So our investment started pre-COVID, much before COVID, and that has been very helpful. I think if you look at, there may not be barriers, but there were some infrastructural investments people had to make. For example, as a essential services, all our pharma factories were operating right through COVID, and our COVID heroes were working round the clock to make sure that our patients get the drugs they need. But small investments, I would say, like in VPNs, so that people, some part of the workforce could work from home. So those kind of things, I would say. But I think that it has accelerated the whole, pace of digitization. So I won't say problems or barriers, but yeah, some infrastructural investments on VPN, broadband, which were to encourage people, especially those working from home.
Great, great. Thanks for sharing that. I think, yes, I think especially for a conglomerate like Piramal Group, being at the forefront of this transformation was very important. And I think they've done a commendable job at that. So thanks for sharing that, Vikram. I'll come to you next, Shakun. So what do you think are the top emerging technology priorities these days now?
I think from a priority perspective, there are three levels at which we should look at this, and Vikram alluded to one of them. The fundamental or the basic, foundational block would be from being a temporary fix to how do they convert it into a permanent way of working. When Vikram talks about higher broadband, VPN, perhaps in the early days of the lockdown, it started as a temporary fix for making sure that the business continuity is there. But now clearly that's a new kind of lifestyle and work style that is emerging, and therefore we need to look at how do we permanently create work structure and IT infrastructure that can enable that kind of distributed workforce. The second thing would be around when people are secluded, dispersed, and working from different locations. It's extremely important for us to be more empathetic and also give them a very seamless experience. So the second IT priority would be, how do you invoke empathy and how do you make sure that the experience is very seamless. That again goes back to the first point, because most of the organizations now will have to rethink their or enterprise application strategy, which would also mean having a single consolidated view of just about everything and not just parts of data or information which is relevant to me from a functional perspective. Lastly, I think mental health and well-being and physical health-being are the topmost concerns or priorities, and therefore we find more and more applications of technology in helping organizations manage their employees physical health and mental well-being. So those are the three priorities to my mind.
Thanks, Shaakun. I think you very rightly pointed out the three priorities today. And I think, yes, creating a seamless experience for employees along with taking care of the well being, I think that's really something that's coming out as the top priority for organizations. So thank you for sharing that. I'll come to you again, Vikram. How are you leveraging technology to engage and improve workplace experience?
Actually, if you look at I'll talk about COVID because that's the flavor of the season. In the early days of COVID, I think the technology, it was all about um, how can we really enable people to work. So I've spoken about, the infrastructure, etc., needed, whether it is VPNs, etc. So I think the early days of COVID, the maybe March, April were the times when we were talking about infrastructure, and that was one level of engaging, making sure people are able to work from anywhere. So that was the first phase. The second phase, we started looking at it in May, June, was all about productivity, connections, and that's where technologies like Teams, etc., helped. Collaborative technologies helped. And then, as Shakun mentioned, when we started moving into July, August, we started to see a lot of stress, mental, health and wellness. So we also brought in a lot of apps. So we tied up with some external providers. We also have built some in-house apps to see whether people are safe for contact tracing, etc. So I think a lot of technology came in handy. Our app is called C-Safe. So how do you make sure people who are turning up at factories? Because by July and August, we started to see our first few cases, and that's why safety started to become very important. Of course, all of them have people have recovered, but I've seen use of technology during these phases. And the last couple of months, I would say, when we did our surveys, we found which segments of our population are stressed out, and therefore we were able to provide inputs around mental, physical health, financial planning, etc. Specifically. So I think technology has helped us along the way in different phases, in different forms. And if you ask me, so like I said, right from infrastructural technologies to poll, we use technologies to poll for people and find out how stressed they were. And in the last 2 months, we're using learning technology a lot, and e-learning and digital learning has taken off, in a big way. And I think that's not just in our company, but in most companies. And therefore, whether it's polling technologies, learning technologies, engagement technologies, I find all of these have played a part in the last 7 to 8 months.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. I think that in every function and every aspect of the employee life cycle, I think technology has very seamlessly become a key enabler there. So thank
And
you so much, Vikram,
one
for
more
sharing.
thing, Yasmin, if I may, sorry to interrupt you.
No, no,
We've
please.
also completed an acquisition. We bought a pharma factory in Sellersville, Pennsylvania, in United States. And because of our technology, we were able to integrate that during COVID in a record time of a few weeks. So again,
Wow.
technology even to integrate a new site in
Yes.
all of this action the last 7 months.
I think that's a great story. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Vikram. So I'll come to the next question is also something that I'll have to ask you again. So what are the action steps that HR needs to work on from an IT enablement standpoint?
So I think two or three things I would say. One is always working. We've always worked in tandem with the IT team, and I think that has been the biggest blessing, because when you're working to see what are the tools, what are the challenges, what are the kind of things that we need to do. So we worked. We are joined at the hip with our IT team and continue to do so. So I think that to me is the first and the best enabler. The second is to actually formally have change management programs. So both on the HR side and the IT side, we actually have change management champions who think through all the steps needed to take people through change, whether it's the Cotter's 8-step model. But I think it's very important to keep some amount of change management principles and guidelines front and center as you implement these technologies. So that has been our second insight, saying how do we have very robust change management plans, which include training, and training communication is one of them, but essentially removal of those roadblocks so that the technology can be fully absorbed and assimilated. So I would say that is the second thing. And the third thing is training, and more training. What we found is skill building is underrated. We've looked at different things like skill cards or knowledge champions, people who master those new technologies, and making sure they are the people who are training others. I really believe that technology training is so underrated. We have to leverage newer means, whether it is simulations, more engaging technologies to make people experts on the technology, and that's where the magic begins to happen.
Thank you for sharing that. I think yes, especially the last point on skilling and how do you enable those skills in people in these changing times where technology is changing on a daily basis is very very critical. So and also how in the point on how you have to be connected with from the hip with your IT team. So that's what HR leader needs to look at. So Shakun, what would you like to add to that part? What do you think are the action steps that HR needs to take to work on from an IT enablement standpoint?
I think I'll just add a bit to what Vikram has already said. It's all about change management. Within the ambit of change management, I think there is a very strong case of looking at or relooking at policies and practices of organizations. When we do a lot of organizational transformation work, some of the things we have realized include some policies that were either created or put in place because the technology had certain limitations, and therefore those compliances, those controls had to be put in from a policy perspective. And in another case, there were certain technologies deployed because there were certain policies because of the nature of the workforce. Now, interestingly, if you see, both these things are rapidly evolving. The nature of workplace, the nature of workforce is rapidly evolving, and of course, technology is evolving. So I think HR and IT needs to go back to the drawing board, understand what their policies are. I mean, we've seen humongous amount of quick decisions being taken around the policies around data sharing and data access, remote access. So much so that the government of India last week announced a completely different policy framework for the working of IT and ITES sector, largely triggered because of not the pandemic, but the aftermath of the pandemic on the permanent change that it has created in the nature of workforce. So as I said, in addition to what all everything that Vikram covered, this is one more aspect of change management.
Thanks for adding on to Vikram's input, Shakun. There were some interesting points there. So now, Vikram, I'll come back to you again. So there are HR leaders who encounter business teams who are unsure of the organizational readiness for leveraging technologies for talent management. How do you suggest this problem to be addressed?
I'll probably expand on what Shakun was alluding to. My experience is, the whole, once you put the employee or the customer of that technology in the center, that's what design thinking is all about. And we've really leveraged and benefited a lot by putting, the user at the center. So user experience, user interface, design, thinking as a tool to create the right technology or create the right interfaces, because that's very important. And I think, to my mind, there are great platforms like Oracle. They've been tested across multiple organizations globally. And what we found is, even a lot of good partnership even with Oracle, to continuously enhance the user interface, continuously enhance applications. So, to my mind, that has been a very, very good experience where to get businesses on board, how can we get more and more people who are users, especially on the business side, as a part of the design sprint, as a part of the design process, because it cannot be just designed in isolation by the HR and IT team. So users at the core of it. And the second thing is, technology is always iterative. Never settle. We've never settled for one technology and said this is it. How do we keep pushing the boundaries, even with world class partners like Oracle? And that's what brings in newer and newer and better applications, more customized solutions. We've actually been able to create a little customized talent management suite actually for our talent reviews, which sits on top of or works with Oracle. So I think, to me, that's the excitement, to have a partner who's open to have these dialogues and work together in and not accepting that we've arrived.
Working with the right partners, working with the business leaders, deciding on the right solutions. I think that's how the entire suite of IT technologies will work. Shakun, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think it's humbling as well as reiterating that we've never arrived when it comes to technology. And now, as a responsible partner, it's the impetus is on us to keep leapfrogging and making sure all our customer organizations are ahead. So yeah, Vikram, we are all together in this journey. Thanks for your support and guidance.
Thank you. Now it's time for two rapid fire questions for both our leaders. So I'll start with you, Vikram. So I'll ask you one question and you have to answer it in a brief way. So as a leader, what is the one top priority or key focus area you are currently focused on?
I'm really excited by predictive analytics. So I would say, at the moment we're working on predictive attrition models. We've been able to come to an accuracy of about 79, 80%. That's what I'm excited about focusing on.
And Shakun, what about you? What is the one top priority or key focus area for you right now?
So for us, it is enhancing productivity while taking care of the mental well-being of our employees. As I said, some of the new stuff has been a way of life for us, being a technology company that we are. But with the rapid increase in the cloud business, we are really looking at how do we leverage technology to take care of the mental well-being of our employees. And interestingly, predictive analytics is playing a very, very important role there as well.
The next second question for you, Vikram, would be what is that one idea on leveraging technology to boost experience that you would like to share?
I think it's going to be a little, disruptive. I'd like technologies where you can share and people can see each other's salaries, and it's an open, because I think a lot of heartburn and friction happens on account of this whole notion of who's paid what. And I speak more in my personal capacity, that I think the time has come when everything is so open that maybe companies need to also freely talk about and share salaries, so that it's all very clear, because as it is, things are moving in the direction of skill based pay or pay for performance. I think, just like we all know how much a sports star is paid, we all know how much was paid to the last NBA basketball player or to the IPL cricketer. I think that might be an idea whose time has come, and technology can play a role there.
I think that's a very, very interesting point. I think transparency is really, really important. Yes, controversial, but yes, if organizations can evolve towards that stage, I think that would be ideal. So, Shaku, now I'll come to you. What is that one idea on leveraging technology to boost experience that you think is important today?
So before I tell about my idea, I want to reassure Vikram, this is a policy matter and it's a much larger thing. But rest assured, the day you decide to do that, Oracle HCM system will take just about a couple of, perhaps couple of days to
Um,
activate it and, bring that transparency. That's the agility that is already built into the system.
so,
Now, that being said, uh, the whole experience is about, see, we are also getting into that realm of technology fatigue or the Zoom fatigue. Somebody very interestingly said that the Monday blues of the earlier times have now got converted into Zoom fatigue or Zoom blues. So I think now is the time for us to understand how we can make technology so real that that fatigue that is associated, that artificialness that is associated, goes away. And I think the next level of development, for example, is bringing virtual reality into onto enterprise applications, looking at no UI, for example. Now we are working on all voice based applications and so on. So
And
Great.
Yasmin, if I'm allowed to
Yeah,
share one more,
absolutely, Vikram.
I would think still, if you look at how much we are gaming, addicts outside, I would still feel the whole notion of gaming, and of course, Shaakun alluded to it. But I would just say a lot more fun and games and gaming type of technologies coming into the workforce. I would still believe these are still very expensive. Can technology become cheap so that whether it's onboarding, inductions, all of that can be done, achieved through gaming rather than a lot more serious training, onboarding, all of that stuff which happens. So I think corporate technologies are still very serious as compared to the technologies at home through which young adults, children are learning today.
Vikram, on a lighter note, since I come from the survey background, a good way of bringing gamification to your vision would be let everybody decide each other's or guess each other's salaries. And once somebody's salary is guessed by, say, an X some number of people, and the underlying hypothesis is that quite a few people already know it, we go out and publish it. So that way it becomes a gamification based transparency in the system.
That was an interesting idea, Shakun. Thanks for sharing. So, on that note, that was all we had time for today's discussion. Thank you so much, Vikram and Shakun, for sharing such great insights with us. I love the point about how do you involve business leaders in your IT technology decisions. How do you work and on predictive analytics? How do you work on increasing productivity by working on the overall experience of your employees? So, some very interesting insights and points shared by the both of you. Thank you for giving us time. So, ladies and gentlemen, these were Piramal's Vikram Bector and Oracle Corporation Shaakun Khanna sharing their insightful thoughts with us. We really hope you enjoyed watching it. Watch the conversation with our next industry leader in our next episode. Thank you so much once again, Shaakun and Vikram. It was a great conversation, and see you all in the next episode. Thank you and bye bye.